Kathy.
Hey.
Are you ready to talk about our ranking of Universal monster movies? At least the 8 we watched. There are many more.
There are. And I was so curious of how Universal even got into this, just because, you know, you and I know living here, especially and having Universal Studios right there, like they're known for their monsters.
Absolutely.
And I remember going to the live show back in the day when they would have the monsters all come out on stage and the bride, and you don't see them. I mean, I don't really go to Universal outside of Horror Nights anymore, but there was a time where you did go to Universal and Frankenstein was walking around and the bride was walking around. It was very much a big part of what Universal
I can tell you they do still walk around.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they do, because, you know, sometimes you go to the parks and I'm all about making things relevant and updating, but you know, this is Universal to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Spielberg.
Yeah, especially Frankenstein and the Bride. Those are ones that you see walking around there. So
the Bride's a fun one.
They keep it alive.
That's good. So just to give some people reference to this, folks who maybe haven't watched these or don't know as much about Universal, just some bullet points here. So Universal was founded by Carl Laemmle, and some people know his name because there's Laemmle Theaters and things like that. So Carl Laemmle in 1912, Universal was actually considered a small studio alongside 2 other studios, Columbia Pictures and United Artists. United Artists, I think, was Chaplin, if I remember correctly. I might be misquoting that, but I believe that was his. And these 3 were referenced to as the little 3. Little 3, those 3, which is funny because all 3 of them became pretty big.
Those funny independent productions.
Those tiny little, Universal Studios. United always stayed kind of small, but Columbia and Universal grew. So once Universal caught on to the audience's appetite for grotesque and thrilling themes in the 1920s, Universal went, you know what? We're going to capitalize on this. And they then focused on pioneering and really leading the way and capitalizing on the horror genre. So they thought, among all of these monsters that we'll talk about today, there was a commonality among them, which was this depiction of being an outsider, which you and I have talked about on other shows, and this ability to pull sympathy from the audience, but also a level of revulsion from people as well. And the majority of them, with the exception of a few, were really driven by the desire to be accepted. And I think that's why when we talk about, if you go back to the episode I did on queer horror, some of that is really connected. And, some of these others were known to be driven more by depravity. So that's a little bit just about Universal and how they even got into that. So
yeah, and I looked it up. United Artists was Chaplin.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. So today we are going to rank 8 Universal monster movies. What we did is we talk more at length, like 15, 20 minutes about each one of these movies for our patrons. Some of you might have listened to the 5 or 6 minute clips that I've been posting on Mondays of our Patreon content. And so those 5 or 6 minutes often get into, 11, 15, 20 minute discussions about each one of those movies. And so what we're going to do today for you guys who might not be patrons is rank them all. And we'll just give a couple of qualities. We won't go into the whole thing again, of course, but we'll give a couple of qualities of each one and why it's ranked that way for us. But what we're going to do is best to worst, actually.
We shall.
Because the worst ones are kind of sometimes the more interesting ones. So we're going to go best to worst. Overall, Kathy, when I look at my ranking, it looks to me like I would say 5 of these are, I would say, good movies. Like out of the 8, I would say the top 5 for me are good and I would recommend. And the bottom 3 for me, I would say,
I'm really interested. I have a feeling I know your order.
Yeah, because we've had so much conversation about these.
Yeah, but also I think that you and I maybe have a very similar order, I'm guessing. Shannon and I do not know how we ordered these. And I'll be curious to see where we're different, because I think... What's your number 1?
So my number 1 is The Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, okay. Was not expecting that.
I guess she didn't know. She's like, wait, what? Out of the gate, surprises. The Bride of Frankenstein, I am specifically talking about the 1935, 75-minute original title was Bride of Frankenstein. I guess now it's morphed into The Bride of Frankenstein. Drama, horror, sci-fi. Mary Shelley reveals the main characters of her novel survived. Dr. Frankenstein, goaded by an even madder scientist, builds his monster a mate. And for me, this movie was smart and engaging and metaphoric, and Boris Karloff is awesome. And I also saw, even though this is wildly different than the Mary Shelley's characters and the book and such, it's had some metaphors and flavor and emotion that's in the book that I could kind of tease out, although the story, none of that is the same to me, but obviously because this is Bride of Frankenstein. But I don't know. I really liked this one. I love some of the quotes. It made me laugh at times, so anyway.
Okay.
What's your number one? I think I know.
I'm sure you do. Which one?
The Invisible Man.
It is. I love Claude Rains so much in this movie. So this is 1933. This is pre-Code. Pre the Hays Code, I believe. Science fiction horror film. Dr. Jack Griffins, played by Claude Rains, the Invisible Man, is covered in bandages and his eyes obscured by dark glasses, the result of a secret experiment that makes him invisible. Taking lodging in the village of Iping, never leaving his quarters, the stranger demands that the staff leave him completely alone until his landlady and the villagers discover he is invisible. He is neurotic. He is flamboyant. He is manic. He is narcissistic. He's all the things that we hate in real life that make a character so much fucking fun.
Yeah.
I just thought this was a fun movie.
I did too, and that's why it's my number two.
Okay.
So those two were really very different types of movies. Like The Invisible Man to me it's listed as a horror sci-fi, but it's a comedy for sure.
It's a comedy sci-fi, I think.
Yeah, it's got a lot of comedy, and I get why it was horror for the time, but we wouldn't look at it necessarily as horror now, but it's hilarious. Like, it was funny and it was engaging. That was, I think, its best quality, is that it was engaging from beginning to end. A lot of times it's hard to watch movies from the 30s for our contemporary sensibilities, but this one, not hard at all. Like, it moved, and it was an H.G. Wells script. So
that's right.
That makes sense.
It does.
It's well written.
It's so well written. And basically, like, the guy is just this grandiose, like, megalomaniac. He wants to get Dr. Cranley to buy in, taking over the world with him. Mm-hmm. He's throwing shit around. Like, every scene is so over the top.
Yeah,
and
it's good stuff.
It's so good. That's my number one.
Okay, so I think you need to do your number two, because I just said what my number two is.
A Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Okay.
I love this movie for so many reasons, and this one is, I love it for maybe the exact opposite reason, which to me, it's actually a sad story. I think that the creature is misunderstood. I think the creature is trying to live his life, and to me, it's like, not to get too deep, but there's a level of, like, taking over, colonizing this area where they want to pathologize this creature because they go into his space, and clearly he's going to have a violent reaction to that. Mm-hmm. And they are experimenting and probing him. And the woman in the film, you can tell that there's a conflict in how she feels about what's going on, and in some ways has to feign this fear of him, but really there's a part of her that's really empathizing, especially being a woman, and she herself being a minority in some way, shape, or form. I just think that everything from the metaphor to the story to the guy who played the creature, I thought was wonderful, considering he did not have one line. The effects and the costume of the creature at that time, the way that they did his whole thing, the way that it was shot, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, Boris Karloff was the creature.
The creature. Yeah, that's right.
this is my number 3. So we're pacing a
funny.
little bit now.
Okay.
So I'll just mention that I liked this for many of the reasons you said. I liked it because it's an actual horror movie.
It is.
It actually came off like a horror movie, whereas the first 2 I've mentioned felt definitely more sci-fi. This one is also, this one's definitely a horror movie with a monster. Like there's an actual monster, whereas I don't know, Frankenstein doesn't feel like a monster. I'm sure it did at the time, but it certainly doesn't now. And I also and it's very serious. I liked the fact that there were relationships that were developed.
Yes.
And that you could, if you chose to, like, care about the characters and what happened to them and how they were navigating the situation. And so I just thought that was unique in these ones.
Yeah, it's good.
So that's my number 3. So now you got to say your number 4 or your number 3, because
My number 3 is The Phantom of the Opera,
okay,
1925. Lon Chaney. This is a silent film. It's not very long, but to me, the atmosphere, it reminds me of like a film noir, like a German film noir. It's really eerie. I think that The Phantom actually, this feels like a horror film to me. And it actually, he freaks me out. I mean, it's hard to be scared by some of these older movies.
yeah,
And I think that Lon Chaney's portrayal of the Phantom is really believable. And he's actually a monster in this film. He's creepy as hell, and it's effective. The Phantom's been done so many times, and to think that out of all of the times that it's been redone, whether it's been for Broadway or the new one that came out with Gerard Butler, my God, the one that came out that you and I watched from like the 40s or whatever, 50s, whatever it was, that was terrible. This one is very effective. It's incredibly dark.
yeah,
So
great,
Yeah.
awesome. So I'm going to move on to my number 4, and my number 4 is Dracula, 1931, 75 minutes. This is Bela Lugosi, so there's nothing wrong with that at all. My issue with this movie, and the reason why it didn't rank higher, because I really went into this thinking that Dracula would be my number 1 in many ways, but it's so slow and it lags so bad in the middle. And it was difficult to go forward, but I did feel like it was horror, but it lost my attention in the middle. And I really feel like Bela Lugosi is the reason that it ranks so high. And so that's why it's number 4 and not higher, but
Okay.
it's not really any lower.
Okay. So my number 4 is for similar reasons, and it's The Wolfman.
Okay.
I love Lon Chaney Jr. in this, and I think that when I think of Universal horror, this is the movie that really stands out to me, because if you've ever been to Universal and you've ever done the backlot tour, there's still a lot of pieces of the set, and they always reference, this is the area where they shot the Wolfman. There's something about the story that's very tragic, although there are horror elements to it as well. I don't think the watching it, just like Shannon talked about with Dracula, there are points where it dips down a little bit, and what holds it for me are the special effects for 1941 were quite sophisticated, and the set, all of that is really what keeps me there. The fog, the atmosphere, the story's fine. So that's why he's like kind of right in the middle for me.
Yeah, and so we're pacing again because The Wolfman's number 5 for me.
Okay.
Like I said in the beginning, these first 5 for me, I would recommend. I would say these are solid movies. I liked The Wolfman for the horror aspect, for the special effects. And I would add, because it's pretty emotional, there's a way that it ends, and there's some qualities to it that are familial and emotional and relationship oriented, but it's much more atmospheric. I mean, there's like a scary witch lady in it that I dig, and all of this. Like, I like all of that, but it drags so badly that I can't. Yeah.
Melva.
No.
Melva is the woman you're talking about.
I know, I liked her.
So for me, number 5 is Frankenstein. Frankenstein is fine. It's fine. I wanted more because it's James Whale and he did The Invisible Man, and he was pretty legendary at the time. He was known for doing a lot of Universal stuff. Again, You have to appreciate the fact that the makeup and the effects and all of that were really fun. Boris Karloff, enough said. He's fantastic in this role. I thought that he personalized the role, and I've watched his documentary where he talks about the conflicts that he had with James Whale and how he wanted to make Frankenstein a little bit more empathetic, those things. But the movie itself, the story, doesn't really keep my interest. He keeps my interest.
Mm-hmm.
The monster keeps my interest. Then you have the classic scene of, it's alive, that, and that there's your moment
there's
of that.
A couple of fun bits.
And there's a couple of fun bits, but it just is, it's just kind of there. Mm-hmm. We think of Frankenstein being one of the better ones because the monster's so fascinating and he's so much fun, and he's nothing like the Mary Shelley, but from a horror place. But the movie itself,
Yeah, I mean, so my number 6 is Frankenstein, and I'm a fan of this story, and that's why I like Bride of Frankenstein so much more, is because this Frankenstein, because of the star and the director's issues with each other about the script and the character, I just found that the character was so inconsistent in the way it acted, and if nothing else, all of these other movies, the monsters are consistent. Like you might hate the movie, but the monster acts consistently throughout it. And I get that Frankenstein is often portrayed as, and is portrayed here too, as having like more emotion and more range of experience than your average monster, but it just ends up being kind of boring, and there's not any horror in it really.
Yeah.
And I would have much preferred, honestly, if they went a funny direction, but obviously they weren't going to do that at that time. I mean, The Invisible Man being the exception. But yeah, so Frankenstein's my number 6.
Okay. My number 6 is Dracula. Mm-hmm. Bela Lugosi was really fun in this. I think when we talked about this on Patreon, I had mentioned how this was the first time the Bram Stoker's Dracula had actually been portrayed on film. But really, when you watch it and if you read a little bit more about it, it follows more of like German Expressionism and Nosferatu. It's closer to that as far as like the artistry of it. Mm-hmm. He's wonderful in it, but the movie is not good. The movie's just not good. And so I have it as 6 mostly for him, but I put it on 3 times, and I think I had an attention span of 6 minutes of it.
Yeah, kind of very
slow
moving.
Yes.
My number 7 is The Mummy.
Okay.
And my number 8, my worst one, is Phantom of the Opera. Now, Kathy and I watched different versions.
That would have been my 8 as well if I watched yours.
We watched different versions of Phantom of the Opera, so hopefully you can understand why it's my worst one.
Yeah.
And I give you both of. I give you the end here because it's not, powers of deduction are not difficult. Like I know what Kathy's last ones are. Yeah. The Mummy for both of us.
That's my 8.
Okay, so give us the rest of your list, and we'll just talk about the trash altogether.
So I have Bride of Frankenstein as number 7 for the reason that I just wanted more of her.
I remember you,
and I feel really fucking cheated because I love her, and I think her character is fucking amazing.
Yeah, there's so many other movies where she's. I mean, there's other movies where she's the focus, but
yes,
I can understand why.
But you get like. It's called The Bride of Frankenstein.
I understand.
And you get 3 minutes of her
But it's also on brand.
It is.
Like, it makes sense to me. It's like, I wanted the lady. We wanted the wife.
But it'd be like calling it Frankenstein and getting him for 2 minutes at the end. I would have been just
all
as
the
pissed.
time. Werewolf, whatever. Then there's no werewolf. Right. No, I totally get why.
She's so great in that little bit of time that she's on. And the story leading up to it it's fine. So that's why. I wanted more Bride.
Yeah, and then your number 8?
The Mummy.
Okay, great.
That piece of shit.
Right. So my Phantom of the Opera that I watched is the 1944 one, and it's last because it's bad.
Oh, it's so bad. What year was it?
1944.
That's where I said Christine was no angel of music.
Yeah, it's rapey, it's creepy, the music is really awful, and I realized this became an incredibly famous musical on Broadway and toured all over the place. I can't say to watch this movie. Like, it's just insufferable. It's not the 1925 one that Kathy watched that's actually a silent film. So they're different. And
They're very different.
And then The Mummy is down there too. I imagine if I'd watched the one you watched, The Mummy would still be last or second to last. It's 1932.
It's such a shame.
It's a fantasy horror. A resurrected Egyptian mummy searches Cairo for the girl he believes to be his long-lost princess. And this is Boris Karloff as well. And his performance is good, of course. It always is with Boris. But this thing is so boring. It's not a monster movie. It's some kind of existential crisis.
Well, and like politics.
And politics.
It's some sort of existential crisis.
It's like The Mummy having an existential crisis.
Oh, you're so right.
There's like one shot in it where it's kind of cool where you see like the little wraps that he's in. He comes out of the coffin and the little wraps are like trailing him out. And so you know he's going to go out into the world like that. This is within the first 5 minutes. And then the rest of the movie is a fucking existential crisis.
It's a political campaign.
With a political thing and then he's trying to like mind meld everybody and staring into their eyes. And it's
weird.
It's
the effects are cool. The makeup's
bizarre.
Great.
Of
this
course.
is where Universal. I mean,
But that's what you know about all these movies, right? Like that's a given. It's like Kathy saying it's called Bride of Frankenstein. I wanted more Bride. Like it's a given that all these movies are going to have great special effects.
But
because
yeah,
that's
The
what they're
Mummy
known
was
for.
Bad.
Yeah, I think we can agree.
It was boring, unfortunately.
It was bad and boring. And thank you for listening.
Yeah,
we hope we weren't bad and boring, but. Love you anyway.
If you haven't seen these, though, they're fun to go back and watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would both say that if you have a sense of humor about psychopathy and small towns and all the thing, like The Invisible Man is a super solid recommendation out of all of these.
Yes.
I think we would both agree on
it's a fun one. And
that one
quick.
in particular. Well, and I think that's the one that surprised us the most.
Yes. I didn't expect it to be that funny.
Yeah. And I didn't expect that Dracula and Frankenstein would be sort of dull.
Which tells you.
So fucking famous.
Well, it tells you that's because the creatures are fun. Not the movies.
And at the time, and the lore over the years, Dracula's been remade a thousand times and all this. And when they remake The Invisible Man, it's not really the Invisible Man. It's not the spirit of the original movie.
But you know what's next then?
What's next?
I want to see what Hammer does with these.
Yeah. So what we're going to do in the spring sometime is we're going to watch some Hammer movies and do a similar thing. We'll pick, a couple handfuls of them and do that. But right now on the Patreon, we're doing the Menendez brothers. So we're waist deep in that at the moment. And we will continue to do that. And we thank you very much for listening today to the show. Happy fall, I guess. Yeah. Happy fall.
Fall or winter?
No. Is it winter though? If it's not January.
That's true.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's winter some places. It's certainly not winter in California.
I mean, we don't really have one.
I mean,
it's a lot cooler than Arizona.
They're like,
though.
it's going to rain. It's going to rain. Like drizzle, drizzle, drizzle. It's like, really? Okay. Thank you so much for listening to the show.
Thank you for listening to Shannon's diatribe.
Thanks for listening to Terror Talk. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Kathy. Sleep safe, everyone.